It's a true story of an Indian man who leaves his country to fulfill his dreams and hopes for his family. However, his cruel sponsor, or kafil, imposes brutal conditions and ruins his life. He escapes one day, but the desert is not merciful to outsiders. The story begins when Najib hands over his passport and visa to the immigration officer as soon as he lands in Saudi Arabia. His companion, Hakim, and he are searching for their sponsor, as they were brought over on a helper's visa by a company. But after waiting for a long time, no one shows up. They try dialing various numbers, but since it is a holiday, no one answers. The man at the airport advises them to wait a little longer, as it is a holiday, and their sponsor might be stuck in traffic. While waiting for their employer, they see an Arabic man searching for someone and mistakenly think he is their sponsor. The cunning Arabic man snatches their passports and orders them to sit in the back of his truck. Najib and Hakim cannot understand his language, but follow his orders and get into the truck. During the drive, Hakim asks the Arabic man if he can call his mother, as she must be waiting to hear from him. However, the sponsor does not listen and continues driving. The truck finally enters the desert after leaving the road, and Hakim falls asleep. After a couple of hours, the truck stops, and the Arabic man orders Hakim to get off. He plans to leave Hakim with another Arabic man and take Najib along. They resist, saying they will work for the same company and share the same room, but the Arabic man drags Hakim away. The truck continues its journey through the night. It is almost dawn when they reach a goat barn in the middle of the thick desert. The Arabic man asks Najib to get off the truck and settle down, but there is no place to sit or lie down, just desert and a makeshift camp made of ragged clothes. An old man who looks Indian guides him to a tap for drinking water. As Najib sips a few pints, a camel's face terrifies him, and he quickly gets up. He asks the old man, who is about to fall asleep, where he can rest. The old man tells Najib to lie down anywhere he wants. Najib gets inside the camp, lies down near an Arab man, and uses the man's clothes to cover himself on the bare ground, resting his head on a bag. He reminisces about the time when he worked to extract sand from a river in India. One of his friends told him about his brother-in-law, who is well settled in an Arab country and could help Najib. Najib was so poor that he could not afford the expenses and had to mortgage his home to get the money. He traveled to meet his friend's brother-in-law and gave him all the money. Meanwhile, back home, his mother cooks an amazing meal with the help of his beautiful wife. It is raining, and they are happy that Najib will go abroad to earn better money so they can live in a nicer home. Najib returns and tells his wife, who is expecting their first child, that before leaving he spoke to the local butcher who will deliver a goat's head to their home every week. Suddenly, Najib wakes up as the Arabic man kicks him out of the camp and tells him to rest somewhere else. He spends the rest of the night in the back of the truck. In the morning, he tries to talk to the Indian old man, but he speaks Hindi while Najib only understands Tamil. Najib takes a pot of milk to the Arabic man sleeping in the camp, who drinks it all. Afterwards, Najib requests to be taken away from this place, explaining that he was supposed to work in an office as a helper, but believes he has come to the wrong place. The Arabic man kicks him out of the camp. Afterward, the kafil arrives, and Najib pleads with him to call the office's phone number. Instead of helping, the kafil tears apart the pages of the diary containing all the numbers and throws them away. He tells the other Arabic man to keep an eye on Najib. After sitting on the sand for a while, the kafil offers Najib food, which he mindlessly eats. Najib follows the old Indian shepherd and asks where he can find the road in the desert. The tired and hopeless man tells Najib that it is very, very far. That night, he writes a letter to the love of his life, his wife, not knowing how he will send it to her. Before leaving, his wife shared her wish that she only wants a room for both of them. They suggest cute names for their firstborn, and Najib lies in his wife's lap, feeling enormously happy about the good days that are about to come. The day of departure finally arrives, and he leaves his wife and elderly mother at the railway station near their house. His wife's eyes plead with him to stay, but he leaves anyway. The next day, Najib receives a kick from the kafil when he is seen washing himself after using the toilet. The kafil strictly tells him to stay away from the water as he purchases it with money. Meanwhile, the water supplier's tank stops and begins filling the drum. Najib seizes the opportunity to talk to the man and requests to leave this place. The kafil overhears him and, upon realizing Najib is resisting and angrily expressing his desire to leave, initially beats him with lashes. He then goes inside to get something to teach Najib a lesson. An Indian man passes by and advises Najib never to mess with the kafil. The kafil returns with his gun and brutally hits Najib's legs and hands. At that moment, Najib remembers his beautiful wife and how they loved each other. He taught her to swim in the river because she was afraid of it. He recalls the happy days of their wedding and their love. That night, he feels trapped and asks the old Indian man how long he has been living there. The devastated Indian man, who looks half dead as he feeds the kafil's hungry camels, tells Najib that no one ever leaves this place. The next morning, Najib wakes up and receives orders to milk the goats. He has never done it and doesn't know how. As soon as Najib approaches the goats, they kick him and he falls down. The kafil watches him and offers a little water, but advises Najib to get back to work as directed. Najib never sees the old Indian man again, and no one tells him where he has gone. One day, he looks at his face in the car mirror and is terrified by his changed appearance and long beard. The kafil breaks the mirror when he sees Najib looking at his face. Najib then tries to trim his beard with the broken piece of the mirror. His face has changed and time is passing, but he can no longer remember how long he has been trapped there. He cries and promises himself that he won't die here and starts running away, but while standing on a plane, he looks down at vultures nibbling on a human body. It is the unburied body of the old Indian man. He cries and tries to push the vultures away, but they attack him instead, injuring him and forcing him to run to save his life. That night, he eats a little from the pickle jar his mother gave him before he left India and cries over his misery, fearing he might never be able to return home. The next day, Najib takes a goat into the desert and starts running away from Masara, but unfortunately, his kafil sees him. He follows Najib on his camel, and when Najib does not stop, the kafil fires a bullet in his direction. He gives Najib a brutal beating that fractures his ankle and then ties his hands with rope after bringing him back to the camp. Najib is left without food and water. Eventually, he manages to untie his hands and drinks water from the goat's supply. Countless days pass by, and one day, when hail starts, Najib takes shelter under a rock nearby. The rock has an open side, and after walking a few steps, Najib sees a man there. It is Hakim. They hug each other and cry. Hakim briefly tells Najib that he has recently been brought to Masara, but has been to many places before this and has been tortured very brutally. He pleads with Najib to leave this place with him, but Najib is so disheartened that he can't think clearly. Hakim leaves, promising to meet Najib again. A few days later, Hakim sees Najib with his camels in the desert. He is in a hurry but wants to share his letter with Najib. He leaves the piece of paper on the sand and runs away. Suddenly, Najib's kafil arrives and tells him to return quickly before the sandstorm hits. Najib barely manages to retrieve the letter. It describes the hardships Hakim has faced so far, how he was beaten and forced to work. However, Hakim has met an African who knows the paths in the desert. Hakim promises that the African will help them escape the desert. One day, while Najib is working as usual, he hears someone singing a beautiful song in Tamil. It is Hakim, who has come with his African friend. They meet and promise to make their escape plan for the night when the kafil's daughter will be getting married. The night before, the kafil brings Najib a piece of roasted chicken and promises him biryani the next day. They all seem very happy. The next day, Najib receives grass to feed the goats, and all the Arabic men leave the camp, telling him to take care of the animals as no one will be there that night. As they leave, Najib feeds all the camels and goats and takes a shower in the tank's water, which he was never allowed to use personally. He then changes into clean clothes from his bag and pats the animals, who have been better to him than the humans. Soon, Hakim arrives with his African friend and urges Najib to come quickly as they need to cover a long journey before the Arabs return. With limping legs and no proper shoes, Najib begins his journey to escape. After walking all day, they stop at a camp because Hakim is very thirsty. The African man bravely goes to get water, but the campers wake up and start following them. They run to save themselves and spend the night on the sand. The next day, they continue walking, but neither water nor a road is in sight. Hakim starts hallucinating about desert sand turning into water. He runs after it to drink, but is terrified to find a camel's corpse. He becomes despondent, fearing that the desert will consume them as well. That evening, the African man starts praying, but as he does, a lot of snakes emerge from the sand. He can only carry Hakim away, while Najib gets trapped among the snakes. They shout at Najib to stay still, and amid the terror, Najib remains in place as the snakes creep over his feet. He survives, and the dangerous snakes eventually retreat back into the sand. Under the intense heat, they all stop to rest, but when they wake up, Najib cannot move as his feet are covered in large blisters. Without shoes, his wounds are severely painful. Their African friend wraps his cardigan around Najib's feet so he can walk again. This helps, and they resume their journey, but they are now very thirsty and still have no water or road in sight. In despair, Hakim collapses on the sand and curses them for bringing him this far to die in the wilderness. The African man prays to Allah to help them escape the desert, and after walking a while, he carries Hakim on his shoulder. However, Hakim's condition worsens. The African man puts his sweat drops into Hakim's mouth to keep him alive. That evening, they collapse and spend the night there. The next morning, Hakim hallucinates that there are roads and buildings nearby but falls down when he realizes it's a mirage. He starts engulfing sand and begins to panic, claiming that his friends are walking in circles. Suddenly, he collapses and vomits blood. Najib tries to wake him and keep him alive, but Hakim takes his last breath and dies. Najib mourns over Hakim's body when their African friend notices the sand moving beneath his feet. It's a sign of an approaching sandstorm. He drags Najib away from the storm, but it approaches quickly and traps them inside. They hug each other and wait until the storm passes. Another day passes and night falls. The next morning, they are devoid of hope, but the African man takes a walk anyway and encourages Najib to move. Najib walks as instructed, but falls down because the clothes wrapped around his feet are torn and his wounds are worse. The African friend gives his shoes to Najib and continues the journey barefoot. Suddenly, the African man spots a lizard passing by, which is a sign that they are not far from water. In a rush to drink, Najib runs towards it, but his friend drags him away, advising him to drink water slowly after such a long fast. They do so, fill a water bottle, and begin their search for the nearest road. That night, they both fall asleep, but the next morning, Najib wakes up alone with a water bottle left where his friend had been sitting the previous day. Najib realizes that his friend has deserted him, and now he is on his own. Once again, the water bottle is empty, and Najib eats the only date his friend left behind. Somehow, he walks with his water bottle to refill it, but it falls onto the nearby road. Finally, Najib reaches the road, but no one stops to give him a ride throughout the night. The next morning, he starts walking along the road on his own until a kind man offers him a ride to a nearby city. The man provides water, and when Najib arrives in the city, he enters a Tamil restaurant where the owner treats him very well. The owner arranges for some boys to wash and clean Najib, gives him new clothes, and shaves his head and beard. They reconnect with his family, but no one answers the call. Eventually, his neighbor delivers the message to his family, and they learn that he is fine. They report him to the police station, where he lines up with other expats who have run away from their kafils. That day, his kafil arrives and identifies him. However, he was not the one who sponsored Najib. He only abducted him from the airport. Therefore, he spares Najib, but Najib has to spend 3 months in jail. Afterwards, the Arab government sends him back to India. The movie ends here.